The $10 billion Housing Australia Future Fund aims to build 100,000 homes for first home buyers over the next decade. The initiative is part of a broader housing strategy, including the Help to Buy scheme and the National Housing Accord, which targets 1.2 million new homes in Australia by 2029. Would you care to comment?
Well, just if you look at sort of the actions as opposed to the words, their signature housing policy, whilst it's got some houses under construction at the moment, not one has been completed in 3 years. So not one house has been brought to market. They've fueled demand, as we said before, like they've just put 1 million buyers into the market, 1 million renters, and they've made it harder for Australians. Their focus is on community housing as opposed to providing support to first home buyers. They talk about the 5% deposit policy. It was actually introduced by the Liberal government, and we want to continue that policy. So there's common ground between the two parties now on that issue. In relation to the fund that you spoke about, this is in part what Standard & Poor's talked about, these off-budget funds, and that's in part what's contributing to the risk of our credit rating at the moment. And the government's talking about putting $100,000 into building, a home. You can't do a renovation for $10,000, and you don't get much of a renovation anymore for $100,000 with the price that the
bathroom and kitchen goods cost.
Well, that's right. And so I don't know what sort of homes they're going to build for $100,000, but it obviously, and they haven't outlined the detail, but it's obviously some sort of subsidy that they subsidise the construction of a home. So frankly, I just don't think it'll ever happen. But it sounds flashy when you've got a $10 billion, future housing fund. I just think look at the reality of the last 3 years, and the housing crisis is just really, I think it's been devastating for a lot of young Australians. Young Australians are putting off having kids, and older Australians, parents and grandparents, even though they'd worked hard, provisioned for their own retirement, are staying in the workforce longer now because they're got to help the kids with monthly repayments or with a deposit. So that's that'd be my critique of their policy.
The second thing that AI come up with is cost of living. It says Labor's modest. This obviously is about as unbiased as you can get because it's unless the AI is hallucinating, which it can do from time to time. But it says the cost of living. Labor's modest tax cuts start in 2026, 2027. That's next year, and they're designed to provide gradual relief, doubling in value by 27, 28. What would you have to say about Labor's cost of living measures? Well,
it's the contrast here is that Labor's saying 70 cents a day by way of a tax cut starting in 15 months' time. So let's say, $4.90, let's say $5 a week, $260 a year. That's what they're promising you by way of tax cut. Our alternative is to say, starting from day one, we want to lower petrol by 25 cents a litre. So you're saving $14 a tank, $28 a week for a two-car family, $1,500 a year. And that then is followed up by the $1,200 tax rebate. If there are two of you in the family, $2,400 for the year. So you end up with a net benefit over that period of, depending on the family circumstances, but let's say $3,900. It takes you a lot of weeks at $5 a week under Mr. Albanese's plan to match what we've got on the table. And as I say, we then fix the system up so that we can bring the prices down. Mr. Albanese is promising the $150 energy rebate, but not fixing the root problem. So he promised before the last election energy costs had come down by $275, and they've gone up by $1,300. So we want to fix, it's a bullet on a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. We want to fix the underlying problem as well as provide immediate relief. And the 70 cents a day, $5 a week in 15 months' time, I just think if you're out there talking to families at the moment who have, deciding not to insure their car because they just can't afford to pay the premium, I think they'd say, you know what, I'll probably take the help now.
And the third point that AI gave me was on energy, and it says the Labor Party wants to continue to invest in renewable energy projects, and this aligns with Labor's climate goals, focusing on reduction of emissions and transitioning to cleaner energy sources. Have you got a comment on?
Well, we're all in favour of zero emissions by 2050, or reducing our emissions and being responsible. And we're an exporter, and we export to Europe and other countries, and there'll be a requirement ongoing for us to have sensible policies in place. But this, as I said before, like it has been a wrecking ball going through the economy. And have a look at what's happening in parts of Europe, or what happened when Ukraine was attacked by Russia. Germany and France and other countries were all of a sudden worried about energy security. There are reports out of Spain at the moment. I don't know the cause of those blackouts there, but no economy can function without reliable power. And the Prime Minister and Chris Bowen want to pretend that solar and offshore wind and green hydrogen, that'll keep the lights on. It just won't. And this is why people who've got solar panels at the moment are starting to find that they're being penalised because the sun shines during the day and they can pump energy into the network, and they were paid a reasonable tariff not too long ago. But now the battery technology hasn't got to a point where it can store energy to keep the fridges running or the air conditioning unit running overnight. And we have to have a baseload power, and we have to firm up the renewable power. We need 24/7 power. The hospitals need it. Cold rooms need it. Mining needs it to pay the taxes. Every part of our society, energy is the economy. And so yes, I mean, they're signed up to a renewables only policy, but it's killing the economy. And that's if you ask me what's the biggest single factor as to why grocery prices have gone up by 30%, I think it's the energy policy. And as I say, it's not just your power bill at home that's going up, it's the farmer, and it's the cold storage provider, and it's a transport operator, and it's everybody who's paying more and more for electricity and gas. And that's why we want to address gas and electricity costs and bring them down.
The fourth one that says is education. So AI says education, it says expansion of free TAFE programs is set to benefit over 600,000 Australians, addressing skill shortages and boosting workforce participation. Got a comment on that?
Well, as we discussed before, nothing the government does is free. So for somebody to be paid to go to do a course, another taxpayer is paying that. So somebody who's just finished their degree or just finished their apprenticeship, they're the ones who are paying for it through their taxes. Now, I'm a really strong supporter of young Australians deciding what is best for them. If that's uni, that's great, but you're not a failure if you don't go to uni, which is sort 100%. Of the Labor ethos. You should be encouraged to do a trade if that's what's important. What we've said is we're going to set up and invest further into the Australian trade colleges instead of the TAFE model. It allows kids in year 10 and 11 and 12 to start their apprenticeship and get some of that underway by the time they leave school. They can get paid for part of it. They're developing skills. And in addition to that, we're putting $12,000 into a wage subsidy for trainees and for apprentices so that employers see them as more attractive and will employ more apprentices, particularly in the construction sector as well.
And the final one is health. Labor has committed, and this is going to rankle you, it's Medicare, but Labor has committed $8.5 billion to Medicare, aiming to have 90% of GP visits, that's visits to the doctor, bulk billed by the end of the decade. I presume he means 2030. This includes funding for urgent care clinics and women's health initiatives. What do you say about?
Well, some of the government's claims at the moment in relation to health, as it pointed out before, are just completely overblown. So when I was health minister, the bulk billing rate was 84%. It went up, and the Prime Minister makes this point that it went up over the course of COVID because more people were doing telehealth consults, et cetera, getting vaccinations. It went up to 88%. Today, it's at 77%, so down 11 points, and Australians are finding it hard to get into a doctor. So, as a dad, as somebody who uses the health system, obviously myself, I want to make sure that we can have a really strong primary care network, because that stops people from going to hospitals and presenting at emergency departments. It means that there's earlier detection of cancers, and it means you can be treated much earlier. And blokes in particular, I might say, should go to the doctor more regularly. Women are much better at going to the doctor more regularly. And we need to invest in training of GPs because we've got an ageing workforce. More GPs are getting older and retiring. And also it's less attractive as a specialty compared to obstetrics or gynecology or to other specialties where people can make more money. So we've got to properly pay the doctors. So we support additional investment into Medicare, and we've been very clear about that. We've doubled the number of psychology sessions, which Labor cut in half, because particularly for young kids with complex psychological needs, we need to get them with more support, not less. And we've made a big investment into GP training. We've worked with the Australian Medical Association and the Royal Australian College of General Practice to come up with that plan. So a very strong supporter of general practice, and there's probably some similarities between where Labor's at the moment and us. I just think we can manage the economy more effectively, which means that we can ultimately invest more into health, and that can help keep people, healthier and detect particularly those cancer types earlier, which means the survival rates are much higher.
But just so anyone listening or watching can get it clear, you're not going to smash Medicare.
No.
Where's that coming from?
But it's their scare campaign, and they ran it. Remember, they ran it before Tony Abbott got elected, and they ran it before Scott Morrison got elected. They ran it before John Howard got elected, and before Malcolm Turnbull was elected, there was his Medicare campaign that we were going to privatise Medicare. I remember older Australians coming up to us on the booth crying, saying, "I voted for you for all of these years. Why are you going to sell Medicare?" And it proved to be a complete and utter fabrication. Like, they were misleading and lying to elderly Australians, scaring them. And that is part of their campaign again now. I just think Australians realise it's a con job, and the Prime Minister is saying all of this because he can't get re-elected on his track record, and throw the mud, run the scare campaigns, tell the lies. That's how you get elected, and that's what this election is about. And I intend to make sure that that's not the case, and I want to stand up for our country. I want to make sure that we're safe and secure. I want to make sure we can get our country back on track, as well as the economy, and help people, live their lives again. I want to. We've had seven consecutive quarters, so 21 months of negative household growth. That is, households have been in recession for almost 2 years under this government. And as I said earlier, the biggest drop in living standards that Australians have experienced, and people know it. And they're the stories we've heard, the tears that we've seen when we've spoken to families who are working their guts out and just going backwards at the moment. And people aren't better off today than they were 3 years ago, and people can't afford 3 more years of a bad government. It will end up like Victoria, but at a national level. When you get a second term, the first term looks bad, but the second term is when they really consolidate the bad decisions and lock in the debt that won't be paid off for a generation. And let's change the government now and get things sorted.